All right, my next guest on Airwave is Oliver, an incredible music producer who's known for his legendary packs on Splice. So we talk about how he constructs those packs, how he does production for famous pop music artists, his journey from hip-hop to now his electronic sound of today. We talk about virtual festivals, about essential features missing from DAWs like Ableton Live and Pro Tools. We get into a little bit of music theory, and we talk about workflow, staying motivated, and much more. You're going to like this one. This is Airwave with Morgan Page. Airwave is brought to you by RME Audio Solutions. Innovative, user-friendly, and high-quality digital audio solutions, RME offers a comprehensive range of audio interfaces, converters, and mic preamps, all based around its unique and innovative core technologies. Multi-platform connectivity across Windows and Mac OS and iOS class compliance has earned RME a global reputation for providing support to all users on all platforms. Visit rme-usa.com to learn more. Okay, so get me started a little bit with your background, like how you got into doing this professionally. Take me from, 12-year-old Vaughn to
from day one.
Yeah.
I think when I first got interested in music, I think I was probably like 14 or something like that. And I lived in a really small town in Canada, and kind of my only access to music was through watching like music videos, right? So I think it was Much Music, which is the Canadian version of MTV. And I saw these like hip hop videos, and I was just instantly like, what is this stuff? It just really caught my attention. And then from there, I think it was like a DJ Premier record. That was the first thing that sparked. I think it was like KRS-One or something, and he was scratching on it. And I had no idea what that sound was or what was making that sound. And I think I asked my mom, I'm like, do you know what that sound is on this song? She's like, oh, I think they're like scratching vinyl. And I was like, what's vinyl? Like, I didn't know anything, And from there, I went and bought a turntable from a pawn shop for, $15 or whatever, and tried to figure it out from there, And it took a long time because there wasn't resources like there is now, right? There wasn't YouTube and all that stuff. So I think I had a belt drive turntable and like a Walkman plugged in, and I would record these like rap videos off of the TV and try to like scratch over top of them with like thrift store records and stuff, And
the Technics 1200s were,
I didn't even know what those were. Like I didn't know anything about the culture or any of that. It took me years to figure that out because there just really wasn't access. I was in a small town. Internet wasn't anything compared to what it is now, right? So it was more just watching music videos and stuff like that. And then when I got a chance to come to Vancouver for the first time, there was actually stores that sold records and turntables, and that was kind of like, oh, okay, this is like a whole thing,
What was the town that you grew up in Canada?
Penticton, British Columbia. So it was maybe like 25,000 people, something like that. Yeah. So, and I didn't have anyone else to talk to about it either. I didn't know anybody else in town that was interested in it. Right. So yeah, it took a lot of work just to figure out the basics,
Yeah. I feel like if you grew up was it suburban or was it more rural part of town?
Bit of both. I mean, it's just a small town, there's like not much going on at all. And there's mountains on either side. And then there's two lakes on the other two sides. So it's kind of like almost like an island, But yeah, there just really wasn't any access to any of that kind of stuff. So it took a really long time to figure it out, which maybe was a good thing. I don't know.
Was radio influencing it, or mainly those music videos and
mostly music videos, because there was no radio really. There was like local, top 40 or rock oldies radio, there wasn't any like cool radio station where I was from, so it was pretty much the music videos that was. And then, I would figure out, there's, the magazines too would actually help too, right? Because there was, I would get the magazines in the back, you could order mixtapes. So I was like, whoa, there's these like real like hip hop mixtapes from New York. And I would order those, and they would take like 6 months to come to me. So when I got them, they were just like, I cherished them so much, and I really, any CD or anything I got would take at least 3 or 4 months to get. So when I did get it, I would listen to it on repeat, just over and over and over and over. You know, so it was a different time. You know.
So you got deep into the hip hop world, and
yeah, so hip hop was the first thing that I really fell in love with, and then from there it just kind of evolved from, you know, discovering that hey, a lot of these records that you like are actually sampled from these older records, and then I started getting into the funk and soul and that kind of stuff, and then I think, you know, I started getting more into dance music when I think Daft Punk was the first thing that really I really connected with, I think. And I was like, okay, well, they're kind of just sampling the same records I like, but they're sampling the more up-tempo songs on those same records. So it kind of had this hip-hop attitude that I really, I guess, gravitated towards. And then from there, it was just the whole musical world kind of opened up, you know? And then, you know, all these house records that I really loved were obviously sampled from disco records and older house records. And that's kind of how that world just opened up to me, you know?
Did you ever think as a kid this would be a viable career, making music full time?
Absolutely not. I mean, the craziest thing about it is I always wonder like what my parents thought when I was first getting into it, because there was no DJ culture. DJs weren't on stages in front of thousands of people. That wasn't really a thing back then, right? Maybe in Europe that was maybe a thing, but for them to just be like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like they actually encouraged me, you know, which was crazy. So.
And did you start getting a little basement studio together in your parents' basement kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Had the basement studio.
What was the setup?
The setup, well, I eventually got 2 1200s and a good mixer. And I remember that being just like, oh my God, you know, because I had this crappy belt drive. And then when I got the 1200, it was just like, okay, now I can fly on this thing, you know? And I was heavily into like more of the technical side of hip hop DJing. So like scratching and doing doubles and beat juggling and that kind of stuff. Like that I spent all day, every day doing that, you know, which is crazy. But yeah, the basement setup was pretty good. It was like, I had my Nintendo, my Super Nintendo or my PlayStation or whatever, a couch, had posters all around, and there was like a ping pong table and stuff. And I would hang out there by myself most of the time. You know, I was an only child, so I spent most of my time down there, you know.
I'm kind of glad being an only child. I feel like that was able to focus the time and the resources. And I don't know what I'd be doing as an only child as well. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be doing music.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but it definitely like, it teaches you to just like entertain yourself and like be totally happy by yourself. And
especially if you're not in the city.
Yeah. And I mean, like, especially, you know, the COVID thing that's happening right now, it's just like, for me, I'm just like, okay, it's another, you know?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't get to go to bars and socialize. Like, I don't really do that anyways, you know? I probably should do it more than I do, but I don't know. It's been a whole life of kind of, just like working on my craft, and I just find it really fulfilling. Like, I don't know.
I remember growing up, and I grew up like kind of in the country in Vermont, and the idea of getting 1200s was totally impossible because the cost is still insane. You know, they stopped making them obviously, but it was, what was it, $500, $600, and you barely even get them used if you were lucky to find them used. And that was just the standard. And I remember like if you tried to borrow any of these knockoffs or anything else, you're just breaking your parents' turntables and destroying the needle. It's just a different breed of turntable.
Oh yeah, there's no comparing it, right?
Yeah, and even the cost to get started too, like MPC 2000 or a SP 1200, like all these things were like these impossible. The price was the gatekeeper with a lot of the gear.
It really was a gatekeeper, right? It's like if you were that young and you were able to get a pair of 1200s, you either had rich parents or you really, really, really wanted to do it. You know, so I really wanted to do it. I remember saving up. Like, I worked a job at McDonald's and I saved up all summer, and I was like, by the end of the summer, I'm gonna have enough money to get a setup, like 2 12s in a good mixer, you know. And man, you really like appreciate it when you work a whole summer at a fast food restaurant.
Yeah, it's not just a birthday
There's
present.
a certain level of appreciation rather than when something's handed to you, right? And that kind of goes with anything, I guess, right?
Yeah. Did you start to put together, software probably wasn't as powerful enough back then.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're similar ages, but what was the first venture into the production side beyond
the production
DJing?
side was probably, I was probably in my early 20s actually, and it was probably Fruity Loops. I think was the first thing.
Early when it was Fruity Loops.
Yeah,
not
I mean,
FL
even
Studio.
before that, it might have been like there was like I think there was a game for PlayStation that was like a music maker game. So that might have been actually the first thing where I was like, oh, okay. I kind of see how this works, like the sequencing thing, right? Like you make a loop and then you could do, really basic stuff on it, but it was enough for me to be like, oh, this is really fun. And I actually spent hours on that thing trying to make music and I had no idea what I was doing.
It's kind of gamifying the music process.
Yeah. It was cool though. I mean, hey, it got me interested in it, And then Fruity Loops, of course, was like, I had a shitty PC and like Fruity Loops, there's tons of cracks of it. You could just get it for free. So I got that, and from there, just tried to figure it out, and was trying to make like, DJ Premier, like Dilla style beats on Fruity Loops, which was really difficult, And I remember my friend was like, you should try adding swing, and I was like, what's swing? And he's like, explained what swing was, and I was like, whoa, like my mind was just blown. I was like, oh, that's what I was missing.
And like, I don't even know the term for that little double kick right before, and if it's swung, because I never.
Oh yeah,
production.
I call that just like a ghost kick or like
ghost kick.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the actual name is, but that's huge actually. Yeah, the super swung kind of muted kick in between the real kicks,
Yeah, I remember it seemed like I tried to copy hip hop tracks with an MPC, and it was nice because you had that swing on there, and that was a good core studio setup. I had like a Nord lead and an MPC for years, but it was interesting because you were missing, at least when I was trying to make that style to emulate hip hop, you're missing tape saturation, all these little treatments they're doing that give it that feel. And I still don't even know what they're using, but I know a lot of the guys were pushing tape hard, like real tape.
Yeah. It was very difficult to do. I mean, the style that I wanted to do with like Fruity Loops was pretty difficult, but I ended up kind of figuring it out just by sampling records and stuff and using drums off records and stuff like that and chopping them up. I could kind of get close, but I didn't know anything about any of that stuff, You
could import the tape feel a little bit with it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, just sampling drums off other hip hop records and, and obviously sampling from vinyl and stuff like that helped quite a bit. But yeah, that was the first. I actually never had a hardware sampler, unfortunately. I really wish I did though, because one of my friends had one, and it was just like I had so much fun on it. Even just chopping up a sample and being able to replay it, I was like, oh my god, this is so fun.
And I feel like there's this natural compression in there too. Like there's something in the
absolutely.
There's that little bit of grit where you're like, it just sounds different, even versus the DAW. I kind of miss some.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, I think a lot of those old sample machines really just have a sound, right? Because everything's getting ran through the same converters and the same, the same software, hardware, whatever it is. So it does have a more cohesive sound, There's definitely it's easier to have a record sound like a record,
Right.
Like your drums don't sound mismatched from your bass line and your sample. Like it kind of does something to glue them together. It just sounds more, musical, I guess.
Yeah. And so you were on FL for a while, and then eventually you transitioned to Pro Tools. And
so I went to engineering school for a year, and that's when I learned. In that school, I learned the standards, which were at that time was Pro Tools, Logic, and Reason was the big one for making beats. So I knew all those, and for some reason, Pro Tools was the one that I was like, I like this one the best. Like it's simple to use, it sounds good. So I and then from there, I just stuck to Pro Tools for years, many years.
Yeah, I remember the early days when it was using Recycle for loops, and it was you'd have to have a zip drive, and the only way to get the loops all in time was using Recycle, and you'd chop it up, the equivalent of Simpler. These days. But everything was just so much harder, and you really
really difficult. Yeah, really difficult. I remember Logic being painful to use. Like I was just like, I hate this program. Like I remember there was just pop-up windows for every single little thing that you wanted to do, any nuanced kind of thing you wanted to do. I just remember being like, this is terrible. So Pro Tools to me, I was like, I get it. Everything's in one window. I can see everything. there's no sub menus. And like, for me, that was just like, it made sense. I can just drag audio in and kind of mess with it. And
I think even early autotune was like audio suite style. Like you had to render it out. It wasn't even real time.
Yeah.
The first few versions of it. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, we've come a very long way since then.
Yeah. And so recently,
very, very long way.
Are you using both? I know last time we met up, were you using both Pro Tools and Ableton or mostly Ableton these days?
Mostly Ableton. I still use Pro Tools for vocal stuff, like tracking vocals, comping vocals, whatever. I still haven't really mastered that in Ableton. It just seems kind of like way harder to do.
Yeah. I feel like it's coming. It's got to be coming.
It's coming. They really need to do something about it because Ableton's so good in so many ways. But those simple things like that, they really need to address those kind of things.
It is funny what updates they'll skip. Like what they decide is nice to have versus essential, and then they'll put stuff in the updates. You're like, why is this a burning?
Oh yeah, every time I get the new beta versions tested. Here's what we fixed. And it's like, we fixed like Chinese emojis and the delay sub menu of the whatever. And it's just like, cool, man. Can I do batch fades now, please?
Yeah, batch fades. And can you fix the pitch automation? Can
I do like strip silence? Can I do like, I don't know. There's just like a million things small things that I think would really improve it, Apparently the playlisting thing might not happen for a while. Because of the way it was originally programmed. It's harder to do than I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Seems like it'd be an easy thing to add, but.
And so, how did you end up in LA? What was the journey like getting?
To the journey to LA? So I lived in Vancouver. So I moved to Vancouver when I was probably 19 or something. I think it was 18 or 19. Lived there for many years, and my DJ career was kind of taking off more. So by the end, I was DJing, 4 or 5 times a week. So I was just like a club DJ for many years. And then I started getting more into kind of remixing, and I was doing kind of these DJ kind of bootleg records. And I think it was Atlantic Records was kind of interested in what I was doing. And they flew me down to LA for the first time and like put me up in a hotel and all that. And I got a few days in a studio, and Ollie, Oliver Goldstein, who's the other member of Oliver, he was set up to be kind of just help me in the studio and to be kind of a collaborator and like a session guy, And we just like immediately hit it off and became really good friends. And from there, I just kept making regular trips down to LA to work with him because it was so fun. At first, it was, every 5 months I would come down here, and then it became more frequent where I was like coming every month. And then I was just like, I have to just be here. Like, this is so much fun, And that's kind of how that happened. That was back in 2011. So I've been here for a while now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was, so your own productions, pop productions, doing a variety of work already at that point?
No, I mean, for me, it was fully just the Oliver project was the thing that I wanted to work on. And that's, I got a pub deal based on my relationship with Ollie and kind of the music we were putting out. And, that was it. Yeah. I wasn't at that point, didn't care to produce for other people, or it was just all about putting out my own stuff, And, yeah.
And so as it evolves, I mean, you guys, there's no duo anymore still.
Yeah,
is that still in no plans for that to reunite?
No, yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, as of now, it's just me, but things could change in the future. But
and what was it? I said online it was professional differences. Is it creative or professional or
kind of creative? Creative. I mean, we didn't really have many creative differences. We're usually like kind of on board for each other, and we just have the same kind of taste in music and stuff. So yeah, it was more just professional stuff, and it just wasn't working out. And yeah, I just decided, I was like, I just want to do this by myself,
Do you feel like it's easier to just steer your own ship and, have management take care of the business stuff?
Yeah, it was actually like kind of a blessing in disguise, because we had a lot of big things kind of lined up. Like we had, we were on Interscope. We had a management team. We had the booking agents and all the stuff that comes with that. and it was just like it was kind of too much for me, I guess, too. And a lot of those people, like our A&R at Interscope, moved to a different label. The people that were managing us on our they moved to a different company, and it was just kind of like, okay, everyone's moving on, kind of, and like, I don't know. It just seemed like a good time to just be like, okay, let's try something different here, and let's do our own thing, you know?
It seems like with artist projects, it can be exhausting because you have to wear 3 times as many hats. I mean,
yeah,
maybe more, maybe 5 times more. You're expected to be able to sell tickets, to move streaming numbers, to have a brand, to compelling visuals with the brand. It's just so many boxes you have to check.
Yeah, and I mean, basically one of the big reasons why I just kind of wanted to do my separate thing was I was just not getting any help. Like, I was literally doing like 99% of the stuff. Like, I was the guy like coming up with the design ideas and like responding to the emails and finishing the music and like doing a heavy load of the work, you know? And Ollie's just this creative force though. And that's why I always loved working with him is, you know, we're good friends, and he was also just an incredible musician. He's like he's one of those people you just have to work with to really understand the level that he's on. And yeah, that was also part of why going solo was tough, because I felt self-conscious, I guess. I didn't have the confidence, the self-confidence, you know? I was like, can I do this on my own? Like, I kind of need Ollie. He's like, so, you know?
Right. You don't want to work in a vacuum. That always scares me too in studio, where it's like,
yeah,
you trust your gut, but you still need an editor and someone to
yeah. And I found that just collaborating with other people in general is just kind of the best thing that I can do, because I tend to be pretty hard on myself when I'm left to my own devices and kind of overthink things. I tend to do that. So I found over the last couple of years, just collaborating with people has just been like the best thing ever, you know?
And is Ollie doing his own project now, or
no? I mean, he's always been producing records for people, so he's still doing pop records right now.
I'm really curious.
He just did the new Katy Perry one that just came out.
Wow!
So he's doing pretty good.
Yeah, I'm so curious how these projects come about. Like when these are you pitched? Is it management or your publisher that's saying, let's get you to do some instrumentals, we'll shop into vocalists, or how does this whole process work?
For that, it's Josh Abraham is kind of the overseer of that whole project, and he's just, you know, he's super connected, and he works really closely with Ollie, so, and they just have a really good track record, so I think that kind of stuff just comes to them, you know?
Or I mean, even with your productions, especially.
Oh, with my productions.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I just like, I don't really try that hard to like I just try to work with people that I like and hopefully leave a good impression, and things kind of just organically happen. I know it's kind of corny to say that, but I don't know. I find like the shopping tracks thing, like that just like almost never works. But I will say it does work if you have people that you've already you have like a personal relationship with. So like if there's artists like that I've worked with or released records with already, and I send them tracks, then they'll actually do something with it and it might come out, you know? But then there's also those things that, like, you know, your publisher will send you, oh, like Shakira is looking for like edgy whatever tracks, like those like what are those called? Those like, you've probably seen those before, those track sheets where it's just like a list of artists and kind of the style that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Like I've never had any luck doing that kind of stuff, like chasing those kind of things.
Or like writing camps, or that's a whole other thing.
I mean, writing camps can be pretty effective, and you can, at the very least, meet some really good people to work with, I think. So I think those are kind of worth doing. But yeah, and that whole scene is kind of new to me too. Just like the writing kind of session scene, you know, it's just like a different thing, right?
And are people sending you top lines to produce around? Or is it, what's a typical process?
Not so much. It's mostly just getting in the room with people and trying to like write something from scratch, or I've been getting in with other producers too. And it's been really fun, man.
I feel like it's a much cleaner process in terms of getting credit, doing the splits too, where
Yeah.
If it's a song with this backlog of writers and it's gone through 3 sets of producer duos and you're left with like 5% writing share at the end.
Yeah, it's just like, it's not worth doing a lot of the time unless it's like some huge record, I guess. But I've definitely been a part of things like that too, where it's like I was one of the 80 people involved in a song, and it's just like the songs are never good, like ever. It's always like, oh, we need a song for some movie thing, right?
Right.
And it like features, they want all these features, and then they want like 15 different producers because like, oh, it's got to have trap drums on this part, and then it's got to go to this like whatever break. It's just too much, man. That many people involved, it's just like never comes out good, man.
I always thought it'd be a fun proof of concept and sort of a joke if you had a different producer doing every 8 bars of a song, and you have like how many people can you fit in the Chiron on the display of the dashboard in the car?
Yeah. Just break it, right?
It could work if you did it. You did like five or 6 artists, and then it reaches that many people on their Spotify streams.
Well, I've done this. I mean, it's kind of related, but I've done this experiment in the studio where I had a session and it was 2 other producers, and what we did was we had, I think 30 minutes, something like that, to make something. So we all had headphones on, and we would spend 30 minutes on a track, and then pass it to the next guy, like clockwise. Like, okay, now you spend 30 minutes on the thing that I started, and we do a full rotation. Then you have at the end, you have like 3 tracks that have 3 different producers. It was kind of fun.
And is that building off the previous work, or they're doing?
Exactly. Like they would send you, maybe it was just a loop idea that they started and there was no drums, and then you would do the drums, or, fun little exercise,
Have you had a chance to work with these like Max Martin types? And I mean, I guess you've done some stuff with like with Dr. Luke's projects.
Yeah. I haven't worked with Max. I've worked with Luke quite a bit. It's been great, man. It's been a real eye opener,
Does he have a certain process of working that have you been able to absorb some lessons from him?
I think so. Yeah. I think there's a lot that I've learned from him. He says he's learned a shit ton from me too, where I'm just like, what are you talking about? But I mean, I guess that's a good like professional relationship when you're both kind of feeding off each other. And I've learned a ton from him, man, for sure. I mean, there's stuff that he does where I'm like, I could never do that, Like he's one of these guys that can just immediately writes things that are catchy, like almost every time, Usually with guitar. It's usually his guitar playing where you'll do a chord change or something, you'll play something on the piano, and then he'll kind of interpret it and just make it more catchy. And you're like, how did you, In
terms of like things progressions like or leads?
Yeah, mostly leads, I guess. I don't know. He's got a magic touch with that kind of stuff. So
I know, what is it, Max Martin? He's obsessed with symmetry of the syllables, and then like just the shape of the song form.
Yeah. He's a genius for sure. I'd love to like work with him or just watch him work,
I feel like they could write down all of their secrets and it wouldn't affect their careers.
Yeah.
Like I wish they would just do that for the music world in general. It'd be so amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I noticed about Luke right away was, it's funny, like these really successful producers, people will kind of go into their work and, oh, what are they using for this and that? And like, oh, I wonder what he used on the guitar for this or that. And like, he really doesn't spend any time on that kind of stuff. Like, it's like if he tracks a guitar or something, it's, hey, pull up a compressor and maybe a little saturation or something to give it more presence, or you know what I mean? There's not a lot. It's more like, let's go quick.
Right.
I'm inspired. Let's lay this down quick, And then I guess later you can spend more time on the sounds, but generally it's just like not overthinking that stuff, and for vocals too, it's just like, okay, we could have this preset on the compressor. Let's just use that on every track. And,
Yeah. I think it's so easy.
There's not a lot of time spent on that. And then obviously he has, Serban to like mix his stuff. So he always does a really good job, but.
Yeah. I think if you're like the typical modern producer, if you're doing stuff in the DAW, you tend to obsess over what compressors are they using, what reverbs, and then
Yeah, and
it's like putting the horse before the cart. Like it's really more the composition and the arrangement.
Yeah, and I'm actually noticing that a lot too, and that's stuff that I was really obsessed with too when I was learning to produce. Was, okay, I like this record. What did they use for that? What is that bass sound? Focusing on the sound rather than, okay, what makes it good? Is it the groove of it? Is it like, okay, well, that synth sounds cool, but maybe it sounds cool because the chords are cool, and that's usually what it is. It's playing a good riff, or the chords are really beautiful, or whatever it is. So I find like, I've been doing this Twitch stream thing too, and I get a lot of questions like that. Like, what did you use for the chords on that one thing? And it's like, well, I don't know what it was. It was probably silent or massive or something, like something pretty basic, but I would spend my time looking back. I would have spent more time on the musical side of, just playing keyboards or learning guitar or learning bass, learning an instrument, really, I think is like so important, man. It really takes your game to the next level if you can learn an instrument. Yeah.
I always love that with progressions and leads, like learning about cadences and being like, well, why does it work? Is it that there's tension in the last chord that makes you want it to loop? Or, like I only really thought about the past couple of years now where it's like, well, a lot of stuff like Deadmau5 was doing where he'd do this, he would just expand the chord voicings in a way, use less chords, but make them diminished or augmented or something like that.
Yeah.
Without necessarily thinking about theory, but it was interesting to look back and be like, well, it's working because he didn't start it on the one. Or it had this tension, but there's always this tension or this call and response. And that stuff really, really works.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I'm always learning new stuff about just like music theory and stuff like that. I consider myself still like an amateur at that stuff. So it's fun to just like unlock new things. And like, even if it's something simple, like learning, this dominant chord leads into this minor chord and it works every time. Like I can modulate that and use that anywhere, like on any progression, like learning all these kind of like little tricks and unlocks. It really just helps your creativity. Like you don't want music theory to be this thing that kind of stifles your creativity, where you have these rules set in place where I can't really go there because musically that's kind of a weird thing to do. But it can help you when you run into problems, basically. You're like, oh, I have this chord progression, but like it just doesn't resolve nicely. Like being able to be like, oh, well, I know 5 or 6 different things that can help this resolve and loop about, like that kind of stuff is really important to know.
Yeah. Oh, that's what Joel was talking about, Deadmau5, where he was saying if something resolves too easily, you're throwing all that tension away, kind of. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
So it has to pull back into itself. I don't know if it's a circle of fifths.
Yeah, the tension and release, I think, is really, really important I think on electronic music, especially. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe not so much in pop music, but I think generally it's pretty important, right? Like even just like sus chords that, holding a sus chord and then you land on the major or whatever it is, like that kind of stuff really helps. I don't know.
Are you using circle of fifths or anything like that with with writing composition?
I still like I'll try to learn that stuff and then I kind of like immediately like forget it, Right. So I have this really bad habit of just like I just kind of learned like 2 keys. So like when I learned how to play keyboard, I was just like, oh, the black keys kind of sound good together. And then from there, it was just like, I would just transpose everything. So I'd be like, okay, well, I like this song. Let's figure out what chords they're playing. And I would transpose it to my key and learn it in my key. And then after a while, I figured out, oh, most of the stuff I like is like the same chords. There's like, it's pretty rare that there's like, it's always these like, I love like major sevenths and stuff like that. And I just realized, oh, wow, it's a lot of the same stuff. And if I can learn that, then I could probably make some stuff that I like. I can make some chord progressions that I like,
I have one of those circle of fifth wheels where you spin it and it shows all the relative keys. Yeah. And I've always been thinking like someone's got to make a plugin. I was telling the Mixed and Keith guys about it. Yeah. Like you got to make it so you can drop your samples in and be like, okay, my toms are my minor, my relative minors, or like drop them into each little chunk of that
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
It'd be so cool. No one's done that yet. It's crazy.
Well, I always say that, like, I think a lot of that stuff should be integrated into DAWs.
Into the DAW, yeah.
Like, why is it not why do I need to open a third party thing to figure out what key this thing is in? Like, that's
they're very
ridiculous.
unmusical. Even Ableton is
like,
very,
that seems like, and that technology's been out for quite a long time, right? Like the mixed in key kind of technology where it analyzes a song and gives an approximation of what the key is and the tempo, right? It's like, why is that built into a DAW? That'd be so useful. It'd be incredible, right?
And even chord cadences are only in Cubase, I think. Maybe some, in terms of native integration. But it's weird how unmusical they are.
Yeah, and I just can't wait till that more of that new technology is kind of integrated into the actual DAWs, right? Because there's so much stuff. I mean, there's stuff, like Studio One has this thing where Melodyne's built in, right?
Right.
So you could take your MIDI, say you have a chord progression, right? And you can fly it up into this one kind of window, and it makes it so the whole song follows that chord progression, I guess. So when you drag audio in, it just immediately warps, like polyphonically. Like you could drag a guitar loop from Splice or something and throw it in, and it'll polyphonically pitch shift it into the key of your song. And it sounds kind of wonky and like kind of messed up, but it's really cool. And like, there's so much stuff like that where you're like, why isn't that integrated into just everything? And like, or even Ableton, like, why can't I transpose my entire song at one time? Like, why isn't there universal transpose? Like,
it's a lot of steps to change all that MIDI to transpose. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's like, it's all there, right? Like all the audio you can transpose instantly, right? And the MIDI's instant too. So why can't there just be one knob where it can just change all that?
You do tempo, why can't you do key?
Yeah, exactly. It seems insane that they didn't include that, right? So there's a lot of, it's weird that we still have to use all these third-party things to do stuff like that, but I think that stuff will start to get integrated. And I guess it's not that simple too, right? A lot of these companies own copyrights on this technology, so it's probably deeper than I think it is to really get that stuff into DAWs.
Sub-licensing the technology out.
Yeah, right.
It seems like I gotta try the new Madeon, the new upgrade where I like it separates like the S's and whatever it has. What does it do? It does what you're talking about, like adapting the chords, the samples to the chord progressions, and you can see the chords. It actually has real chord detection.
Wait, there's a new version? Is it like version 4 or something?
5.
So 5 just came out, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't even looked into that.
Supposed to be a big upgrade. But,
yeah, for me, Madeon, like I know some people use it a ton for stuff, but I pretty much only use it for vocal stuff when I'm like, okay, this vocal is pretty bad. It's like the last resort for me where I'm like,
it really affects the quality.
I got to use Madeon to fix this vocal, it does an incredible job at that, but it's just still kind of a pain in the ass because you have to print it. And
I still just like, I'm lazy. I just throw auto-tune on and set it to like retune at 20 and I'm like, sounds fine. And just automate if I got a hard tune stuff. But
I would do that in Pro Tools too, right? Like, okay, well, I got auto tune on pretty light. This note's still a little salty, and then I would just highlight that one note and Audio Suite pitch it like a little bit.
So tell me about putting these packs together. I mean, I think I use your packs every day. Like,
thanks.
Pack. I always use those disco loops for some reason, just to create some structure to the rhythm, just to get things going and have a vibe. But
a lot of people, I think a lot of people use them like that too, right? Where it's just like an immediate kind of, you have an idea, you want to get something down quick, and you're like, okay, well, I don't want to spend, half an hour on the drums, and then they'll just throw something in, and then by the end, sometimes it just stays in because they're like, oh, it sounds good, so we'll leave it, and that's kind of what they're for. I wanted them to be loops that I would use in my own production. So I think having that mentality going in, making them and being like, I want to use these later too.
It would be funny to make a pack of things you don't want to use. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah, but I do feel like there's a lot of producers have that thing where they don't want to share their like, oh, these are my like golden like samples that I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like maybe that's less of a thing now, but I do feel like that it used to kind of be like that. Like you would have your sounds and be like, I'm not sharing these. Like, this is my sound. I need to like hold on to it for dear life. So, But yeah, the creative process was kind of like, I think the first one was a lot easier than the second one, just because I had like years and years and years of collecting sounds and making, you know, a lot of the loops in the first one, a lot of the drums and stuff were just stuff from sessions that, you know, it might have been a demo that I made that never came out, but I spent, you know, 3 days on the drums or something, you know? So I would just tighten them up and bounce out a couple loops. So
Yeah, I think I love the care that you take with these samples. I mean, it's pretty clear that you spend a lot of time treating them. Maybe talk a little bit like some of the treatments you do, just to, you're fattening things up, you're punching up the transients a little bit. What goes through the process?
I mean, as far as drums, that kind of changes all the time. But like the first pack was made in Pro Tools and the second pack was made in Ableton. So it was a little bit different and it was kind of cool, just the transition. But I think the first pack, like the drum stuff, I use a lot of parallel compression in Pro Tools. So generally, like my go-to thing for drums was I would have a drum bus, right? So all my drums are going through one bus. And then I would just double that bus and put like a super insane compressor setting, like just like really punchy, snappy compression. And then I would double that and have one with like OTT or something that was just all release. So just all the room sound, all the noise.
Yeah.
And then the balance between those, right? Like just like, okay, I'm adding a little more punch, a little more release. And then finally we go through one last bus where I would just kind of EQ it and tighten it up, you know? And then, yeah, I use a ton of like transient shapers and stuff like that too.
You doing mainly software, no outboard?
Yeah, none of that stuff. Well, there might have been some synth stuff that was maybe outboard, but like that's all in the box processing for sure. And then in Ableton, like it was just so fun because now I can make these audio racks and stuff, you know, and like it's just opened up a whole new world for sound design stuff for me personally, because you can create these insane audio racks and then just save them. It's like in Pro Tools, it was like, cool, I have this crazy chain of effects and like it's in that session, and once that session's closed, like I can't get it back unless I, you know. So just workflow stuff, I think, has really opened a whole new world of sound design, really in Ableton.
And are you playing the guitars live? Are the session players, or is that you?
The guitars, I don't play guitars, so I have my good friend Ryland, who's got a studio behind me. He played a bunch on the first one, and then Izzy Fontaine played a bunch of the guitars on the second one, and he's really incredible too. So I'm lucky enough to know people that can play and stuff. I know many, you know, good bass players, good guitar players. So I'm really lucky.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the synths are mainly you were saying mainly soft synths, but because I can't even tell with some of them, I can't tell if they're real, if they're soft. I mean, that's kind of the idea, probably.
Yeah. There's definitely some hardware stuff in there, but even the soft synths now are just, it's all how you treat them. You know, if you treat them like analog hardware, they'll sound more like analog hardware, you know?
How do you like to treat them? What are some?
I mean, a lot of it too is like, the thing that I really like about analog is just when you have maybe a MIDI pattern going, right? So you have, say you have a bass line, a MIDI bass line, whatever. And then you just track it. You track like, you know, 6-7 minutes of that bass going while you're tweaking the synth. And like, you get all these things like these magical little happy accidents, right? Like if you track something for whatever, 5-6 minutes and you're tweaking and like, there's going to be some weird shit that happens in there that is like, you can't replicate it. Like it's just some weird fluky thing. Loop. And you're like, that's what I wait for when I'm like, oh, what was that? Like it made this sound. I don't even know what the hell that is. It sounds cool though. And that's kind of how I treat a lot of VSTs and software synths is I'll just track them, right? So I'll just map a few parameters. It could even be massive or something. Like I'll map like the reverb size or like the portamento or something like that. Like a couple weird things in the filter, maybe a detune, and just record it. Same thing, record it for like 5-6 minutes while I'm making these subtle tweaks. And then you get these little, I don't know, these little loops that just kind of have more personality.
Yeah. And I feel like, and you showed me a trick too, in terms of adding a little bit of randomness to the feel of when you're playing a keyboard or Wurlitzer or whatever, especially something with some transient on it, where you showed me, it was almost like a strum, kind of like strumming something just slightly so not all the notes are hitting at once.
Oh, that's like super important. And I didn't really pay attention to that before. But yeah, I think any kind of like, if you want something to sound more realistic and more organic, like you cannot hard quantize it. Like it's just, and that doesn't mean it can't be really in the pocket and super in time. It's just like, if you're playing a Rhodes and all the notes are like triggering at the exact same time, like it just sounds static. It doesn't sound, I mean, sometimes you want that maybe if you're like, maybe there's certain styles of dance music where you want a really hard, stabby sounding, repetitive thing. But for more organic sounding stuff, you have to like, and there's ways to get around that. Even if you don't play well, you can take MIDI and there was a plugin, like a Max for Live thing I got the other day that does the strum. Like it does the, you know, I think it was called Mylon or something like that. You check that out. And there's ways to get around it. Like even in the, you can quantize in Ableton. There's a setting for random, and you can kind of just push that up to like 30%, and it just spaces the notes out a little bit. And then velocity too, right? Like if you're playing a piano and you're hitting the notes, and they're all hitting at the same velocity every time, that's not very expressive. Like that just doesn't sound human, right?
It's like those basics are. I love the tips and techniques where you don't have to buy more gear. You can take what you already have and make your old synth sound totally amazing and fresh. Or even in Omnisphere, it's like if you really learn that in and out, you don't have to just be digging for tons of different obscure presets. You could take your existing one and arpeggiate it differently. Or
man, I think like I always loved Omnisphere. Like I was a big fan of the first one, and like obviously when 2 came out, I was like blown away. But that thing just keeps getting better and better. I'm just like, if I had to pick one instrument, it would be Omnisphere, because it's just like it encompasses so much, right? And when you and sometimes I'll just program sounds on it because it's so easy. Like they have all these amazing like kind of samples and stuff, right? So if you could just start with a basic patch and then go to samples, and there's like all these choir sounds and like just all this incredible stuff. But yeah, I've been really getting into that, man. It's just, man, once you start layering it too, it's so genius, that plugin. It's insane. Like even for synth sounds too, like it just has everything. Like it has Jupiter 8 waveforms and stuff. Like you can
the hardware synth sounds so I don't even use my hardware synths now.
It sounds so good. Yeah.
Like I have some of Dave Smith stuff, like an OB6, which is great, but I have to retune it. Even though it's digital and analog, you gotta really make sure it's not out of tune, unless that's the sound you want. Yeah. But the hardware equivalents sound just as good. To me,
they are like, there was a time when you could argue. There was an argument, analog versus that. There's no argument anymore. If you don't think it sounds incredible now, like you're just not paying attention, or you're listening to the wrong stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
or like those the Taurus bass lines too. Like, do you really want to buy a Moog foot pedal that's like whatever? I don't think they even make anymore. It's $4,000, or just get the patch and it sounds incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no right or wrong way to like make music. Like you can use whatever you want, you know. But you can definitely, at this point, you can make software sound incredibly analog sounding. You know, it's just. Even like there's one that I use that's like a Moog emulator called The Legend. I don't know if you know that one.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty, and it's really light, and it's just sounds so insane. Like the sound is so good. It's like a mini Moog but polyphonic, super basic, right? But for a lot of synth sounds, that's all you need is those. So it's kind of like that, and Omnisphere and a couple other things. I'm pretty good. You know, and then just all the other incredible things that are coming up just for processing sounds and degrading sounds too. That's been my new thing, right? My favorite. Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, your favorite treatments with synths.
Oh, treatments with synths. I don't know. I'm always experimenting with new stuff, but lately I've just been on that wave of like making stuff sound shittier. You know. Yeah. Like I spent so many years being like honing in and making stuff sound like huge, and like, you know, obviously that was more the sound, I guess, at least for electronic music. And like now I'm kind of like dialing it back. I'm like, how do I take these things and make this sound like it was sampled on a record in like 1976? So a lot of that's, you know, the usual, you know, tape saturation and like RC20 and, you know, just, and like experimenting, like just doing stuff you're not supposed to do, like taking a saturation thing and putting like 10 of them on, like just experimenting and doing weird stuff that like trying to break the rules, you know, like if I get a new plugin, like, okay, how do I make this thing break? How do I break this thing and make it do something interesting, you know?
Yeah, I like that. And I guess it could be subjective what's bad, or because if you're making something bad, maybe it's more harmonics, but it's smaller, but maybe it's more harmonics. It's depends how you define it, right?
Yeah, of course. Like I'm just looking for like interesting stuff. I don't know. And like, you know, even like the Valhalla delay, like I don't know if you use that at all, but like you can do so much with just that delay. Like I figured out, okay, you can turn that into a tape machine. You just turn the mix all the way up, turn up there's like a saturation and like tape wobble and stuff. And you have like a tape, like VHS emulator right there, you know?
Have you seen that guy, Blank Forms? He'll like manipulate the cassette tape with his hands. He'll run stuff through a Tascam multi-track, like a 4-1 or it's one of those like, you know, like $600 used.
Yeah.
But he'll tug on the tape and he'll physically mess with the medium before it goes back into while it's looping around. He'll do tape loops.
Gotcha. Wow, that's so cool. I've heard some of that stuff. I don't know if it was that guy in particular, but yeah, man, that stuff's so cool. And like, I don't know, it's just interesting because, like I said, like I spent all this time like, how do I make this stuff sound like absolutely pristine and like flawless? Into like, how do I do the opposite and make this sound like trash? You know? And I mean like good trash, you know?
Yeah.
Stuff with character, stuff with I don't know. There's this, and then like I find the juxtaposition of those two things. Like say you have an intro to a song and it's kind of mono and, you know, kind of distorted or whatever, and then it all of a sudden gets like wide and big. It's just like that juxtaposition, that contrast is really like sounds awesome, you know?
Yeah, I think a weird thing happened, at least on the EDM side, where everyone was chasing loud and chasing big, and everyone immediately began to sound exactly like each other. Still pretty amazing how loud they could get these records. You know, a lot of like the Hardwell stuff, things like that, where it's just perfect, uses the whole stereo field, but maybe is lacking some soul. Maybe they spent all their energy on getting that as loud as possible, but not getting the best song.
I can see that. Yeah, that's when I have maybe a problem with it, is when that becomes the main focus of the song, is like how loud it, like, dude, if I want it loud, I just like turn it up, you know?
Right.
And that's, you know, it took me a while to learn that too. Obviously I was maybe part of that problem of like pushing stuff way too loud. But I still think there's old stuff that I can listen to. I'm like, okay, that's loud, but I didn't like overly squash it. It's not a sausage, right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't feel like it was compromised later, and you're like, I wish I could pull it back a little.
You know, and then I'll listen to a lot of stuff I reference too, is just like, you know, like Prince's first solo record. Like you listen to that, the louder you turn it up, the better it sounds. Like it just sounds better and better and better. And it sounds great at low volume, right? So with a lot of those records, it's like the louder you turn them, they're just like your ears just kind of, it just blows your ears out, you know? They're just, it's too much information a little bit, you know? And
like turning the trims down.
Yeah, dynamics. I feel like dynamics have kind of gotten lost a little bit. But I do think like this whole streaming thing has kind of changed that a little bit, because everything's kind of on an even playing field now. It's like, cool, your song's like insanely loud. You made the loudest song of all time. Well, we're just going to turn it down like a bunch.
Congratulations.
So it's just going to sound like a squashed piece of shit now, because, you know, there's no dynamics. So, but I mean, I guess I don't even know like I honestly don't even know what like mastering, like modern mastering looks like, honestly. I used to master my own stuff, but now I'm kind of like, should I still master it like that? Or is there like a different, what should I be referencing, you know?
Where do you send it now for, are you doing, having someone stem master stuff for you? Or
It's usually just the artists, whatever, get their stuff mastered by whoever they have, you know? But if it was my own stuff, I would still want to master it for sure. I think like I've gotten the album that we did, Full Circle, I got that mastered professionally and it turned out pretty good, but I'm also like, I could have done that. Like it was like pretty much sounded the same as when I sent it to them, you know? But yeah, I don't know. I tend to just get like insanely obsessive if it's my own productions, you know? Whereas with other artists, I'm kind of like, cool, go master it, have fun, you know?
Yeah. I feel like you have to hire fresh ears. That's what I'm paying for.
It is really important. I think I just need to make kind of more relationships with other people that I actually trust for that. And, you know, obviously there's some incredible engineers out there. I just need to let them do their thing, I guess, you know?
It is hard though, because I feel like some guys you could pay a lot of money and they may actually make it worse. And some guys could be a revelation for the track, and here you're not filling out the spectrum the way you wanted, or you know, it's
there's no like hard, like you could send it to some person who has like an insane reputation, and like you could just be like, I don't like it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm that guy a lot of times. Like I'll do mixage for people and I'll send it back, and they're like, it doesn't sound great, you know? And I'm just like, okay, well, I don't know. That's what I would do with it. But if I'm actually finding that out, that like a lot of people are like, oh, your mixes are so great, or can you mix our stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I can try to mix, but it's still like your sounds and your production. Like
right.
I can't, you've made choices in there that I wouldn't have made. So I can't make it sound the way my records sound.
Yeah.
Because I produced them from the ground up. So yeah, it's one of those things, right?
When you're
like, I wouldn't have used that kick drum. I would have used this other one that just sounds way different. So
yeah, if the kick is bad, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I used to just cheat and just like sub stuff out and take their kick drum and like high pass it a little bit, and then throw my kick drum underneath, and I'd be like, "Whoa, the kick sounds great." I'm like, "Yeah, it's like not your kick anymore."
Remove the weakest link.
There's some tricks. There's some tricks you can do. You know, layering sounds and stuff.
Do you? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about like this process of. So you're coming in. You're doing the pop productions now. That's really where you're focused at. How are you keeping objective with it all? Like when you hear a song too many times, we're talking about fresh ears. How does that work? Like if you get the goosebumps, you're making the songs. Like that's always my aim. My metric is this chemical emotional reaction, and then that fades. It always does.
It always does. Yeah, that's a really difficult. That's really interesting because, and that could be maybe a really strong emotional reaction, or it could just be like you're grooving. Like if I'm actually like kind of bobbing my head and dancing to my own stuff, I'm like, okay, maybe there's something here because I don't dance at all. Like but then it does fade, right? It could be one day, it could be 2 days, and then you're kind of like the head nod slowly turns into just your head just staring at the screen, and you're like, you kind of lose the plot sometimes, right?
Right.
So I think
just nice.
I think there's ways to deal with that. I think one way is to just step away sometimes a little bit. If you've worked on something for a few days in a row, or even 1 day in a row, just like put it aside for a while. And then like the best thing is when you listen to something that you did in 1 day, or maybe you made a track start in an hour or something, and you haven't heard it in a week, and then you go back and listen, you're like the listener now. You're not the creator as much.
Yeah, it has to
be like, I don't even really remember making this. I like it though. Or, this, I don't like, there's nothing really going on with this, I
think to me, what scares me is if you come back to something, let's say, usually you don't have the luxury of 6 months of incubation with the track, but you come back in 6 months and you go, I don't know what this needs. Like, I can't hear it fresh. That scares the shit out of me. If that's pretty rare. Like usually, you let it rest, you let it incubate, and it's pretty clear. Like throw it out or chase it down and die on that hill and make the best record you can.
Yeah, well, the hardest part about music is there's just no, especially now, there's so many options, and like things are so flexible and elastic that like you could just keep working on stuff, right? It's like You start to second guess stuff. Oh, is that the right bass sound? Maybe that snare's too, like, you can always, and like, I think there's some saying where it's like music's never finished. You just kind of like
Abandon it.
Yeah, you just like let it go, and at a certain point, you just have to be like, okay, it's done now. But and I've worked with artists where they have the opposite thing, where they're like, cool, it's done, and you're just like, what? We haven't even like EQ, like there's no EQ, like, and then I'm just like, I have anxiety because I'm like, no, and they're just like, cool, it's done, let's put it out, it sounds good, like it has the attitude, the essence of what they're trying to do is there, and that's all that matters. So they're like, cool, let's put it out.
I feel like if it's collaborative, you can do that. Whereas if it's yourself, it could mutate forever. Maybe it's not getting better; it's just getting different sometimes.
Absolutely, man. That's a real thing, And there's nothing worse than like spending a few days on something and like grinding and being like, oh, this sounds great now, and like adding these parts and treating all the sounds, and then you go and listen to the demo that you made in like a half hour, and you're like, oh, that's still better. Oops.
Yeah, you worked backwards.
But the real power is to like recognize that and be okay with it. Like be okay with, okay, well, I learned something, and that was part of the journey, but this is being able to be okay with, okay, that thing I made in 30 minutes just sounds better, and being like, cool, that's the thing now. That's that's a really difficult thing to stomach, Yeah,
you have to kind of be willing to be humbled by that process.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's happened countless times to me where I'm like, oh, why does it not sound as good,
Yeah, or it's funny because I'll always be biased towards I've been making recently versus I'll be biased against the older stuff. And sometimes I'll listen to the older stuff. I'm like, wow, this sounds better and bigger. And like, what did I just, but it's a zigzag, it's like,
yeah.
You're not just doing this straight shot up all the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because you're like, man, I've learned so much in the last year, and like everything else before this is like trash. And then you'll A/B it with something that you made, 6 years ago, and you're like, oh, that actually sounds really good. And I'm not sure how I did that, So it's interesting, man. It's really confusing, And I think that's what makes music so like a lifelong passion and interest. Is it just there's so much mystery and there's so much magic to it that you just can. It's this thing you're chasing, and then you could just never catch it because there's no rhyme or reason to it, really. You can learn all these new things about it, and like, oh, well, I know how to do this now, so like I've unlocked this thing, and it's like maybe you might know less than you did by learning that thing, you know. And that's just what keeps it fun, I think. Keeps your mind really stimulated.
Where do you think things are heading right now? I mean, obviously, streaming is dominating.
Yeah.
More people are in their studios. Are you seeing any trends emerging where, there's limited real estate for playlists right now, like limited spaces, and the gatekeepers have just sort of morphed. Are you seeing anything big on the horizon?
Big on the horizon. I do. I love that the streaming thing is happening right now. I think that's kind of interesting. And as far as like, yeah, the playlist, like I don't really deal with any of that stuff, but like I'm sure it's the same as it was with like radio by now, right? Where it's just like, okay, well these are the gatekeepers, these are the big companies that can get your song
the playlist
in the New Music Friday, and that's the same as radio. I mean, radio was always like that, right?
Yeah.
But the next thing, I don't really know what the next thing is. And I don't know what the next thing is musically or with that kind of stuff, which is kind of weird. Because for the longest time, I would always kind of have at least a hint of what, oh, okay, this could be the next big thing or this or that. But right now, I'm not really unsure,
It's like a big question mark. I feel like, yeah, you hear these whispers of things. Like I remember when Avicii was blowing up and Hardwell, like you hear whispers that turn it in these big stars emerge, and then if it's not Avicii, now it's Kygo who takes that role, or it's this revolving door of stars that often seems to happen, like this archetype. And now it's not clear. Like maybe it's just cyclical. Like I feel like there's a lot of the sound is a little more retro. It's going back to this. At least all the promos I'm getting now are so dark. They're so like Fisher knockoff kind of stuff.
Oh, really?
But also very, very 90s influenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious if it's going to change. Like, I love what you're doing with like I need to watch the Twitch broadcast you're doing. I think I have to subscribe, whatever. Is this a viable way now? I think like are people going to be able to earn a livable wage from
streaming?
Yeah.
Yes and no. I there's not many producers that I will be able to make like a bunch of money streaming, because it's just like, it's really just for other producers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, who else would watch someone like produce music unless they have this really super entertaining way of making music? Like, I'm sure there's some people that can do that. Maybe they make stuff really quick and it's like entertaining and funny, or you know, but like generally, like, man, music production isn't really that fun to watch. It's fun for other producers because they're like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, how did you like what EQ did you use in this, or like blah blah blah. Like, that's really interesting for them. But yeah, like when I stream, there's like, you know, there's like the most I've had is when I've gotten rated by like another big streamer, but it's usually around like 80 to 100 people, like at the most, you know. Sorry, let's mute that.
Yeah, it's interesting. What was it like? You got rated by Kenny? Was it Kenny Beats?
Yeah, Kenny Beats rated, and he's probably, I think probably without a doubt the biggest kind of producer streamer right now. And it's mostly because, you know, he makes beats. Obviously, he's an incredibly talented producer, but he incorporates all these other things like these beat making contests, and there's all these, you know, he always has people in the studio and does FaceTime interviews, and he keeps it more entertaining for like. But still, I think everyone in there is obviously like a hip hop fan or a producer or trying to make beats or trying to learn it or is a rapper, you know? So I don't think it has a mass appeal, really. Like the video game stuff on Twitch is always going to be.
Yeah, that's what's interesting, dominant. Right? People want to watch other people play video games, but music.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know. It kind of does make sense to me. It's a little bit more entertaining to watch, you know? Like watching someone EQ a snare isn't really like, you know? I watch it because I'm like, whoa, I want to see what people are doing, you know?
It's not fascinating.
For us, it's fascinating, you know, because it's our craft, but yeah, and then it's like I get excited when there's like 100 people watching. I'm like, whoa, sick. And then you go and it's like some B-level like Fortnite streamer and he's got like 4K people watching. And you're like, oh, okay. But that's not why I do it. I'm not trying to be like a professional. I think one of the main reasons is just it's one of the only ways to really stay connected to people right now.
Right.
So I'm able to interact with these people in chat, and we're all really like-minded, and they have good suggestions. Like I'll be working on something and they'll be like, try doing I would change that note right there, and you're like, oh, you're actually right.
Huh.
Or like, you know, it's more of the interaction, and it's also being able to make music while people are watching you and you don't even know what you're going to do, and like there's something that's like a muscle that you have to exercise. And like, that's the same muscle that you use when you're in a session with someone. Like a writer comes in, a person you've never met before, and you're expected to like make a song. And you're like, cool. You maybe talk for a half hour and then you try to make something, right? And we're not really able to do that right now. So this is kind of like filling in that void, I think, where it's...
You got to exercise that muscle. Like if you let that atrophy, that scares me. Like that's why I do my weekly DJ streams. Like I want to get nervous in front of an audience regularly.
Yes. That's part of it, right? You want that uncertainty, that kind of like maybe a little bit of fear. Like, okay, well, I could fall flat on my face here, but
yeah,
that's the whole fun, man. You know, like I could definitely see that with DJs, like, and performers. Like it must be just awful not being able to do that. But at least Twitch is. I mean, yeah, you'll probably get some nerves, dude, if you're DJing and then all of a sudden there's like 10,000 people watching your stream or something. Like you're going to be like, okay, well, I'm DJing at a festival now. Like this is like legit a festival because there's 10,000 people watching. It's the same thing, you know?
And I think, and that is definitely an exciting part of it, that it can scale. Like I'm curious to see how the Tomorrowland virtual festival is going to go, where, you know, they're charging $20, $25 a ticket for a rendered DJ world, rendered version.
Interesting. I'm sure that'll probably do amazing, I bet.
I hope it does well, because I think they'll dovetail. It's not like, do you stream or not stream? Like, I think my guess is these companies will continue to do festival streams and club streams in addition to the live events. Like they'll just always be, I mean, Ultra always did that in these big festivals. But.
Yeah, it's just kind of everyone's has to do it now. So it's cool though. I kind of like what's happening where people are just streaming everything. It's cool. I don't know. Because I'm a bit of a nerd. Like I was always on Twitch anyways. Like I game and stuff like that, and I would always be on there if I was bored. I'd just check out what's going on Twitch. So I was aware of it, and I followed streamers and stuff. So when this started happening, I was already like, cool, let's go, let's do it.
Just keep rolling.
Yeah, and it's great for people that maybe don't have access to these big EDM festivals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
For them to have a more complete experience, right? Because that's really what it's about. If these companies are putting more effort into that kind of virtual experience,
especially for the money. I think it's a good thing. And I think it democratizes it too, in terms of you're not paying $400 for a weekend festival. Mm-hmm. It is funny though how the sets overlap. It's like you can still miss artists. Like, how is that even possible? Like the whole idea is that go stage to stage.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
it's like they're planning set overlaps and like, this is a rendered world. Like this is pre-scheduled content as far as I know. Yeah. I don't think it's live.
Wow, that's interesting. But yeah, I guess it was like that with like the Coachella streams and stuff too, but that's, obviously a live event with however many stages
with real people, not rendered crowds.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. When is that going on?
I think it's in a couple weeks.
Wow.
So that's going to be really interesting. I mean, I know I've talked to companies like The Wave they did like a John Legend virtual concert. They did T-Pain, where they have an avatar, like you wear a bodysuit.
Yeah.
And you see an avatar responding to your movements in a suit. And it seemed ridiculous before. And now they have 65 people working just to do these events.
Yeah.
Like they're hiring instead of firing their staff.
It's so crazy. Well, and I don't know if you've tried like Oculus Rift or any of the VR stuff, but like I tried that years ago, and I think it was Holy Ship, like the Hardfest cruise thing, the Gary Richards thing.
Yeah.
And someone was doing a VR thing there, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the future. Like I tried it and I was like, it's like you're there. You can look around and look at whatever you want to see. I was like, okay, well, this is going to be the next thing, right? But it doesn't seem like that's really popped off, but I'm sure that's kind of stuff will,
Yeah, once they get that right, I think it'll change. It was just kind of bulky and hot, and you had to have a $2,000 computer desktop to really have
it's once there's like a consumer thing that has a good price point. I'm sure that stuff will be more commonplace, but man, the technology is getting crazy though,
Yeah, and hopefully, it's been such an interesting learning curve, like learning video, learning streaming and OBS and stuff. Like
it's been great,
stressful, but fun.
Man, it's so funny because you're like, well, I'm an audio engineer. I should really like just this stuff should be no brainer, and it's like so not no brainer. It's so like
open source software. I can't believe some of the choices in OBS where you update it and it'll break, and you got to go to GitHub to get something to get it back working again. Like, you can just switching cameras. You have to add a special plugin in OBS just to change between two different cameras.
Oh, really? See, I only run one camera, but really to be able to switch two cameras, you need two.
Yeah.
You need some other software or something? That's crazy.
I did this whole thing with my setup where I had multiple Logitech webcams because it's just the easiest. You don't need a capture card.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would do a switcher, and I had a projector in my studio. So it would just project stuff from Resolume. But now you can pump your visuals directly into OBS, and you don't need a green screen or any of that stuff. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's been really fun kind of learning that stuff, and just like customizing my kind of setup and adding some different scenes, and like every week or so I'll add something new. I have my friend making like emojis, so like people in chat, I have my own custom emojis and
nice.
All that fun stuff, man. It's been really cool. And like, I think more than anything else, this whole experience of, just the state of the world right now has kind of I'm actually probably more social. I'm like in the, just online, like in the social media. And obviously like before I was just kind of like, I want my music to speak for itself. And I don't really care to like, I like the mystery of music. Like I was always obviously like Daft Punk, and like a lot of groups that I loved were just kind of mysterious creatures, and you would hear the music and there really wasn't that much else to go on. And that mystique was really intriguing to me, and I always kind of wanted to have that. But now I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like open up a little more and just be out there and be more of a personality. And like, you know, someone like Dylan Francis, who I toured with early on, he was really ahead on that. Like he jumped on, he was insane on like Twitter and Instagram and stuff. And he was kind of I don't know, he paved the way for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's like you want to hate the social media stuff, but now it's like you can't just shut off the world, especially now.
Yeah, and I think I was just like fighting it for the longest time. Right. Where I'm like, I just don't want to I don't really want to do all that stuff, you know. And I don't know, but now that I'm kind of doing it and I'm opening up more and sharing and stuff, it's like really fun, you know.
To me, it's like with music, it's always been hard that it's invisible and you can't touch it, you can't see it. And
yeah.
Like I'm really trying to explore, especially now with video, has made me think of like, okay, well, I need visuals for the video.
Yeah.
I need for an hour every night. I was doing it every night, doing a stream, and then now it's weekly. But it's like now you have an opportunity where you're forced to visualize your brand and figure out what works with music and what's pacing properly with the tempo and in the buildups. And I just think it's such a richer experience when you can figure out the visuals. And maybe you need, I don't know, maybe it's worth hiring a creative director. Maybe it's not. That's something I've always juggled.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure that'll be a thing, right? Like, depending on how long this whole thing lasts, like this, I don't know, this could go on for a year from now. Who knows, right? But like that stuff's all going to evolve. Like people are going to be like, oh, well, that's my Twitch like creative director that like, you know, people already have like teams that take care of the OBS and the streaming stuff. And
what are you using Streamlabs or OBS?
Yeah, I use Streamlabs and OBS. I stream with OBS and then I use Streamlabs for just like the customizable stuff. And
nice.
I'm still like, the audio's been a really kind of a struggle to figure out how to set it up properly, because for what I'm trying to do, I have it working now, but now my stream's in mono and I can't I can't make it stereo and it's just driving me nuts. I'm sure we could talk about this stuff off stream. Maybe
for sure.
Some ideas for me on how to fix it. But I found, just because I'm on a Mac too, that there's not really a lot of resources because most people stream on PC.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Know? Yeah, and basically what I'm trying to do is I just want to stream. I want to be able to talk through my mic, and I don't want my mic to come through my monitors and feedback and get this weird echo feedback loop. And then when I play, I want the music to come straight out. And I don't want there to be feedback. And I still want to use my monitors because I don't want to wear headphones, right? So like all these things, you think, oh, that'd be kind of easy to accomplish, but it's like, nope.
And the process
so difficult, man.
Like
yeah, and then okay, well, I have it working now, and now my CPU's shot, and I can only run at like the lowest buffer rate, and I can literally run like one Omnisphere, and then my thing crashes. So I'm running into all these kind of technical things and really trying to figure it out, but.
You know, what's his name? Illmind just bought a Mac Mini as his dedicated streaming machine. You could even just buy a cheap PC and have that be your streaming rig that's doing the heavy lifting of encoding.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out now. So I got like an Elgato and I got some other stuff coming in the mail. So I'm hopefully can figure this out. But it's just a really specific thing that I think producers are trying to do, where it's like what I'm doing, where I got the mic, but I don't want the feedback from the speakers. I don't want to wear headphones. It's sounds easy, but yeah, it's been like, man, it's been a struggle trying to figure it out.
I really want to try to do this is sort of more exotic streaming idea of having a body cam or something where you're seeing a first person perspective of playing the instruments. So if you're not, it's less interesting with screen sharing. That's different. But like if you're playing guitar and you're looking at the chord, the frettings and the chord voicings you're playing, just a way to visualize that. So if I walk over to my piano station, it's like, boom, you feel like you're there.
Oh, I love that idea. I love that idea.
Cool, right? Like really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right now I only have one camera, but that'd be really great because sometimes I'll jump over to, one of my keyboards and stuff. And then I'm like, oh, well, I have to take the camera and like try to move it. And like,
right.
Yeah. If I could just like have something. Yeah. I'm sure there's a way to do that, right?
You could just have like the Elgato, like
the GoPro or something.
Yeah, do GoPro and a Stream Deck and just switch the cams manually.
Totally.
Awesome, man. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Well, I definitely want to be respectful of your time, man. I appreciate taking the time.
Oh, it was great, man. We have to do it again sometime.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. That was my interview with Oliver. Amazing interview, super generous guy. His new pack of samples is out now, Power Tools Volume 3 on Splice.com. So check that out. Great interview, lots of information about his favorite plugins, his process to making music, his process to building those incredible Splice packs that I use pretty much every day here in the studio. So huge thanks to Vaughn for joining us, aka Oliver. So I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to check out mpquicktips.com for free tips and production information. That's my site. Thanks for tuning into Airwave. I'll see you next time, next episode. Airwave is brought to you by RME Audio Solutions. Innovative, user-friendly, and high-quality digital audio solutions, RME offers a comprehensive range of audio interfaces, converters, and mic preamps, all based around its unique and innovative core technologies. Multi-platform connectivity across Windows and Mac OS and iOS class compliance has earned RME a global reputation for providing support to all users on all platforms. Visit rme-usa.com to learn more.